The fourth ox-herding picture, Catching the Ox. Preface. Today you've chanced upon it, so long hidden in the wilds, but you can't keep up with its high spirit, and it won't give up its love of sweetgrass. It's even more willful, ever wild. If you want to tame it, you must lay on the whip. Verse. With your last ounce of strength, you catch it. But stubborn and strong, it won't be subdued. Now it suddenly climbs to high ground. Then it descends to vanish deep into mist. The waka, thinking only, ox, ox, don't let go. Just this is the real fetter. Nyogen Senzaki. You are on the verge of awakening to oneness. Only your dualistic ideas prevent you. You and I met each other many millions of years ago. Now, tell me, where did we meet? Mumon said, if you say you have met him, you have never seen him at all. At this Nyogen Senzaki session, we'll continue investigating the 10 ox-herding pictures. Today, May 7th, we've come to the fourth picture, Catching the Ox. The first three were Seeking the Ox, our true self, Seeing the Traces, and meeting glimpses everywhere in our ordinary activity. Today, we're grabbing hold, but losing our grip. We're not yet able to master it. The ox seems to have a mind of its own. With high spirits, it wanders this way and that. It reminds me of our Bernedoodle Faber as a large, ungovernable puppy. Gradually, she's been maturing. She can sit. She'll lie down when asked. And even so, steady practice is not so steady. When she's been swimming and comes out of the water, off she goes. You can't catch me. Running, running. But then when it's time to go back, okay. We must be completely present to this moment as it unfolds. Or the ox, the puppy, suddenly veers off. Our attention wanders, and true nature follows its own course, running through the fragrant sweet grass it loves so much. Ever more willful, ever wild, as the preface says. It can't be curtailed. Yet the ox comes home as its inner discipline grows. When we realize we, it, are one. We've never been separated. And Nyogen Senzaki encourages us. You are on the verge of awakening to oneness. Only your dualistic ideas prevent you. Our ideas about what true nature is and is not, what we have to do to grab it, how to make it stay. Those ideas are what get in the way. Sit, stay, ha ha, off it goes. Joshu once asked Nansen, what is the way? Ordinary mind is the way, was the answer. But that ordinary mind is not the mental detritus of our usual self-centered preoccupations. Always thinking this is good, I need more of that. No, that's wrong, I should avoid it. Yamada Mumon Roshi said, with your head full of thoughts of good and bad, pretty and ugly, even should you seek out the spirit of the ox of Buddha nature, there is no way that you would be able to recognize it if you saw it. And even when we do see it, when we recognize the ox and actually catch the ox, we find we cannot hold on to it. Someone told me, I touched Mo. But then it slipped away. Where did it go? High ground, deep into the mist. But in reality, it was that I that separated from it, that got caught up again, that got in its own way. And the ox simply continued on in its original freedom, in its ordinary mind, in its mushing. The great way is not difficult, so San Zenji, the third ancestor, said. Just avoid choice and attachment. Still, that moment of touching Mo is the beginning of faith, the awakening of faith. And when we look at Nyogen Senzaki's life, his faith was so pure. Because of that faith, he was always putting himself at risk, going where he knew not how to go, where he would end up, what would happen. No knowing the outcome. Success? Just trust in Dharma. So this kind of awakening, however brief, this touching faith, without our intending it, it begins to grow. It's quite extraordinary. And when we encounter it, we are free from the idea of an ego entity, free from the idea of a personality, free from the idea of a being, free from the idea of a separated individuality. Maybe only for a moment. But that moment is out of time. It's a moment of eternal Buddha. And we know it for ourselves. And then what? Oh, self-consciousness. I had a moment. I touched it. I caught it. Oh, I lost it. Where did it go? So this I and it, as Nyogen Senzaki said, only your dualistic ideas prevent you from awakening to oneness. Return to the breath. This breath, not the last breath. We can't hold on to freedom. We can't put freedom in a box and carry it around. It weighs nothing. But if we try to do that, it becomes a heavy burden. Holding on to something is enchainment instead of enchantment. So the waka, thinking only, ox, ox, don't let go. Just this is the real fetter. I have to hold on. What I? Hold on to what? Just don't separate I, ox. And Nyogen Sensei met each other many millions of years ago. Now, tell me, where did we meet? And he quotes Mumone Kai Zenji. If you say you have met him, you have never seen him at all. Do you understand? If you say you met him, look how far away you are, right? If you say so, you have never had that oneness. So when Nyogen Senzaki says, you and I met each other, who is he referring to? Is he referring to the you called Kimpu? Is he referring to the person called Nyogen Senzaki? You and the ox. When was that meeting? Where was it? If you think you have seen or met true nature, you're lost in daydreams. Simply persevere with no idea of what you are doing or what you think you'll gain. No thought about it. Let it go. Let it be. Just continue to practice. One breath after another. This is right effort. This is training the mind, the ox of your true nature. Even though you want to tame it, you must lay on the whip. What is that whip? Cutting through your own delusions, your own ideas about what it is and how you're going to lay your hands on it. So meet it now. Taste the sweet grass. Vanish into the mist. Nothing can be held. Certainly not true nature. Not love, not joy, nothing. You can and do something without killing it. So we just continue. We just get rid of all our ideas about what Zen practice is, what achievement, what attainment. Just drop it, drop it, drop it. And perseverance through a life of great adversity was really Nyogen Senzaki's gift to American Zen. We might say of him, nothing ever worked out. Everything was a failure. He was born, but his mother was dead. There was no father. He was found by a Buddhist monk and brought to a shipbuilding family in a little village. His adoptive mother died. His grandfather, an inspiring Pure Land Buddhist priest, died. He decided he would become a doctor and care for the sick. And then he realized to really repay the kindness of those villagers who had cared for him, he had to become a monk. So he was ordained at a Soto temple and then found the great Sonshaku Roshi at Engakuji, Rinzai monastery of great renown. But he got sick. He had to leave. He couldn't finish his training. He went home to his little village and started the Mentor Garden, a school for children to convey his feeling that the whole world is a beautiful garden where everyone can associate peacefully and be mentors to each other. We are all children of the Buddha. But the school had no money, and he couldn't find anyone interested in supporting the Mentor Garden. He came to America in 1905, hoping to find support here in this rich country. He followed in the footsteps of his teacher, Soen Roshi, who, of course, was the first Zen priest to come to America to speak at the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, and then was invited back in 1905 by the first American Zen student, Ida Russell. So he went there to her house in San Francisco, and Nyogen Senzaki was not able to accompany him because he was sick with an eye infection. Finally, he was able to go, but when he got to the Russell home, it was clear he wasn't wanted. So again, failed. And Soen Shaku told him, wait 17 years before you teach. And even then, he said, not to speak on Zen, but just to live in it and then die in this foreign land, like a mushroom on an unknown mountain. This may recall words from the Diamond Sutra. Cultivate a mind that alights on nothing whatsoever. No fixed abode. So what could Senzaki count on? I think we all are, to one degree or another, enamored of the delusion that we can count on something. He knew differently. He withstood great poverty, racial hatred, attacks in letters to his family. In 1906 and 1908, he wrote, to state it briefly, there are three purposes for my having come to America. The first is to raise funds for the operation of the Mentor Garden in Aomori Prefecture. But because of the problems I've been having with my eyes, I was not allowed to be on the same boat as Soen Roshi. This eye disease also caused an unexpected problem in attaining the trust of the Russell family. The second purpose is for my own study. Since my main vocation is the Buddha Dharma, I may not be able to pursue ordinary academic studies. But the main reason for my coming to America is to transmit Zen to this country. That's why my teacher, Soen Shaku, used his own pocket money to pay for my travel expenses. Although my teacher has now left San Francisco and we are apart from one another, what I am doing here now is enduring what is hard to endure, doing what is difficult to do. I always tell myself that the land on which I now stand may someday become the land of Buddha Dharma. The person who punches me today may someday become a Buddha. The person who treats me with contempt may eventually become happy. I keep repeating this to myself. It is just like the Bodhisattva never despised in the Lotus Sutra. He bowed to everyone he met, saying, "You will become a Buddha." People became angry. They thought he was making fun of them. They beat him with sticks and stones. He dodged them, but he did not stop bowing, always repeating, "You will become a Buddha." And in 1908, he said, "Nowadays, the anti-Japanese movement is quite strong in California. We have been experiencing a lot of persecution." Starting in 1922, whenever he could save enough money to rent a hall, he would present talks on Buddhism. And he said, "I at last established a zendo in 1928, which I have carried with me as a silkworm hides itself in its cocoon." Then he moved to Los Angeles in 1931, and a few Sangha members gathered, disciples like Shubin Tanahashi, Ruth Strout McCandless, who edited his writings, Louise Padelford, Paul Reps. Spent 13 years there, and then Pearl Harbor. And the US government rounded up all Japanese, and he was incarcerated at Heart Mountain, Wyoming. I have two poems. One, Leaving Santa Anita. That was where people were brought first before the camps were ready for them. A government must practice its policy without sentiment. All Japanese faces will leave California to support their government. This morning, the winding train, like a big black snake, takes us away as far as Wyoming. The current of Buddhist thought always runs eastward. This policy may support the tendency of the teaching. Who knows? That was September 5th, 1942. Later that year, on December 20th, he wrote opening words of Wyoming's Zendo. The evacuation crammed Japs by heads into the units of barracks. Fortunately, the monk could stay with a Buddhist family. He called his share of space Ekkyo, room of wisdom mirror. He suffered heat with the family in Santa Anita. He suffered cold with the family in Heart Mountain. He and the family and a number of Buddhists in the two places meditated together, recited sutras, and studied Buddhism every morning. America gave the monk alms, a single room. Today, he now reopens Tozen Zenkutsu, the meditation hall of the eastbound teaching. He had it 20 years in California, inviting many Caucasian Buddhists from all parts of the world. He has to wait exclusively for Japanese Zen students to come in this snow-covered desert of internment on Wyoming plateau. He has nothing to do with the trivialities of the dusty world. He rather prefers to sit alone, burning the lamp of Dharma, than to receive any insincere visitors. So this Tozen Zenkutsu, the meditation hall of the eastbound teaching, I'm sure you understand it. Why did Bodhidharma come from the west? Right? Eastbound to China. And then the teacher went further east to Korea, Japan. And then what? Soen Shakuroshi, Nyogen Senzaki, D.T. Suzuki, Sokeon Sasaki, many other teachers went in the eastbound direction. This is the globe, right? Went in the eastbound direction, even though they landed in what's called the West. And then what? From the West Coast? Right here to the east, due to the efforts of So and Nakagawa Roshi, Hakun Yasutani Roshi, Edo Shimano Roshi, Zen came to the east of America and continued to Europe. So this Tozen Zenkutsu of Nyogen Senzaki's, probably nobody looks up when you go into the Zendo. How many of you have looked up and seen that plaque? Yes? That's from Nyogen Senzaki's Zendo. Arriving on its journey, found teaching. And so Nyogen Senzaki saw the terrible circumstances of being incarcerated as a continuation of the eastbound teaching, and simply began anew behind barbed wire. No longer able to have Caucasian Buddhists, as he called them, join him, he sat alone in his small share of the room and burned the lamp of Dharma with no expectations and no regrets. Duncan Buchan Williams, author of American Sutra, a story of faith and freedom in the Second World War. This just came out a couple of years ago. Begins his book with appreciative words about Nyogen Sanzaki. As during Senzaki's lifetime in America, again we find ourselves in a period of anti-Asian violence. Ever since Trump spoke of COVID as the Chinese virus, many incidents have occurred affecting our own Sangha members. And just particularly the West Coast has become a dangerous place, as it was when Senzake was there. You know, most of us privileged white folks never even think about the fact that we can walk safely down. But if you're Asian these days, or Black any time, or perceived as different, no place is safe in the USA. After months in confinement during lockdowns, Asian American elders are now afraid to go outside. Carl Chan, president of the Oakland Chinatown Chamber of Commerce, was assaulted last week in Oakland. He was punched in the head on his way to visit a 69-year-old Chinese man who had been beaten with a cane on a public bus. On Tuesday, May 4th, just before session began, two Asian women were attacked by a knife-wielding assailant in San Francisco. One of them, 84 years old. That very same day, in Los Angeles, the author of this book, Duncan Buchanan Williams, was the principal speaker at a national memorial ceremony. There may be some among us on Zoom today who were there. May 4th, of course, was the 49th day after a gunman killed 8 people in Atlanta, Georgia, including 6 Asian women. And the memorial was held at a temple in Little Tokyo that itself was recently vandalized. In the May 5th edition of the New York Times, Elizabeth Diaz wrote about this memorial service. The leaders lit candles in front of memorials honoring Young Ai Wei, 63, a Korean Buddhist mother killed in Atlanta. Vicha Ratanapakdi, 84, an immigrant from Thailand who was fatally assaulted while taking a walk in San Francisco. Chinese immigrant coal miners shot and killed in Wyoming in 1885. All beings who have lost their lives through racial or religious hatred. The Sikh victims in Indianapolis, the prayerful in synagogues, George Floyd. At the service, a ceramic lotus blossom cracked and broken was repaired with liquid gold leaf in the traditional Japanese art of kintsugi. The golden lines record the broken history and adorn it, Dr. Williams explained. The notion of repair has to do with acknowledgement, he said. We can't become free if we do not acknowledge who we are in all of our hurt, in all of our imperfections, in all of our fractures. Trauma is in all of us, in our psyches and our bones. Some of it inherited, some of it our own. And in this book, American Sutra, Dr. Williams wrote about thousands of stones, each with a word in kanji, that had been found buried in a large metal barrel on land that had been the Heart Mountain camp in Wyoming. And they were stored in a barn for 30 years by the owners of the ranch, and then donated to the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, where they were called Heart Mountain Mystery Rocks in a museum publication. And later it was thought, and Dr. Williams upholds this theory, that they were inscribed by a Nichiren Buddhist priest who is trying in some way to bury the Lotus Sutra by writing terms from the sutra on these rocks. But we know a different story. In 2009, I attended an American Zen Teachers Conference at Great Vow Monastery in northern Oregon. While there, I received a call on my cell phone from Lawson Inada, Oregon's poet laureate. He had contacted me a few months before that after reading Eloquent Silence, which came out to celebrate Nyogen Senzoki's 50th memorial in 2008. Lawson Inada had been in an internment camp as a child, and he was very moved by reading Eloquent Silence, particularly by Nyogen Senzoki's poem, which I will read to you now. This was written the third week of June, 1945, from Heart Mountain. No spring in this plateau. Having sleet and rain every day. Timid hills sprinkle green by themselves whenever they meet the peeping sun. All in sudden, the summer came. Days are too hot to stay home. The evacuees go out in the field, wearing their light dresses once again, and pick up tiny flowers of the wild, while they search curious stones of ancient ages. He was typing the English and did his beautiful calligraphy below. So Professor Minata had sent me his poem called Picking Up from his 1997 book, Drawing the Line. He's also the author of Only What We Could Carry, the Japanese-American internment experience. So the story goes on. On the last evening of our conference at Great Vow, I read that poem, and afterwards, Koab, chosen Bays, stood up with an astonished expression. She said that when she and our mutual friend Kaz Tanahashi had gone to Hiroshima and Nagasaki to offer the Jizo Project quilt, to which many of us had contributed panels on the 50th anniversary of the atomic attacks, a filmmaker friend of Kaz's had gone with them and had given her a copy of a 2004 video she had made called Rabbit in the Moon, a documentary about the internment camps. This filmmaker, Emiko Omori, had been in one of the camps as a small child, and her mother had died at the age of 39, and she was a year and a half old due to the terrible conditions there. And the documentary was her way of connecting with her mother. Chosen showed me the opening scene in the video, which is of a 55-gallon oil drum filled to the brim with stones that had been dug up at Heart Mountain. On each stone was a character, a word in kanji. Emiko had no idea who had written them, why they were there. 2 days later, Chogen Renee Berglinger took me to do a reading from Eloquent Silence at Looking Glass Bookstore in Portland. It was at that same bookstore in 1996 when I was giving a presentation on Endless Vow, the Zen path of Soa Nakagawa, that Chogen and I had met. He came up to me and said how moved he was to encounter the Daibosatsu lineage once again, having practiced at Kashin Zendo in Washington, D.C. with Norman Holberg, and having met Edo Roshi here at DBZ. And Chogen continued sitting with us, coming to sessions at Hoenji, and he played the guitar at my Shitsugo ceremony in 2008, and is always with us on Zoom. these days. So I did that reading from Eloquent Silence, and a woman came up afterwards, and her name was Margaret Chula, a haiku poet who had just finished a book called What Remains? Japanese Americans in Internment Camps. And the first poem in the book was titled Heart Mountain, Wyoming. Then I saw a book on the display counter called Stubborn Twig. It's three generations in the life of a Japanese American family by Lauren Kessler, which was chosen by the governor as the official book for 2009 in celebration of the 150th year of Oregon's statehood. So I bought it and read it on the plane back to Syracuse. And it tells the story of Masuo Yasui, who arrived in the States from Japan the very same year as Nyogen Senzaki, 1905. And he tells of the racial bigotry and persecution that he and his family experienced through all the decades. His family's incarceration in internment camps. And throughout this book, and Margaret Chula's book, is the refrain. Shikata ganai. It can't be helped. To endure the unendurable again and again. How vividly this expression conveys Nyogen Senzaki's life. Shikata ganai. Well, I bought the poem Picking Up Stones by Lawson Inada. So those of you who are present in this room, raise your hands if you want me to read it. Okay, you guys on Zoom, you can choose. Stay and hear it, or whatever. Nyogen Senzaki, the erstwhile Zen teacher, he had no degrees, didn't call himself master. While interned in Wyoming, he didn't call himself internee either, went about gathering pebbles and writing words on them. Common words, in Japanese, with a brush dipped in ink. Then he'd return them to their source as best he could. The ink would wash and no harm was done. However, several residents, likewise elderly with nothing better to do, observed his practice and set about collecting the sensei's stones. To seek and find, like an Eastern eggless hunt. And even in the confines of camp, possibilities were endless. For Senzaki, without having to resort to trickery, would simply scatter his gathering and it was difficult to tell which was which, his pebbles, just plain pebbles, or those which in his hands had remained mute, dictating silence. And it was an amusing sight to see these old people shuffling about in dust, mud, snow, sleet, sometimes even crushing ice with their feet, with their eyes to the ground, bent on pursuing the old man's path, giving everything close inspection, pausing occasionally to smile, exclaim, even laugh, and essentially going around putting rocks in their pockets. Still, as they put it, this place was perfect for pebbles, so rich with rounded stones, some of which reflected the colorful proximity of Yellowstone itself, likewise ministered by their government. Moreover, pebble searching had resulted in enlightening arrowhead finds, inspiring some elders to try their hands at chipping obsidian in this land where the buffalo roamed. Eventually, in respectable homes, some of those stones assumed resting places on special mantels and shelves. Worthless souvenirs, certainly, of only sentimental value. For although the rocks may speak to some of distant days, of generations past, like mini milestones, they're still just anonymous rocks with faded words on them. Make, teaching, house, scent, greed, young, seed, leave, nothing, everything, change, east, pray, parents, universe, shine, listen, respect, acknowledge, mind. And as for Senzaki, he died in obscurity, an old dishwasher with few friends, resting perhaps among headstones in Los Angeles, a city zen of sorts, of the earth, one who spoke broken English and wrote on some stones, while leaving others alone.